Have you ever heard someone say, "We are God's chosen people"? It's a big claim, powerful, important. But what if I told you? Many people say that, and they're all pointing in different directions. Some say it's about a family name. Others say it's about religion. Some say it's a place. Others say it's a bloodline. But with all the voices shouting, something deep inside many people whispers a different question. Who am I, really? Where do I come from? Does God know me? Did He choose me too? You see, the Bible tells us a story of a people chosen not because they were the biggest or strongest, but because God loved them. He gave them promises, blessings, and warnings. He gave them a job to shine His light in a dark world. But over time, those people were scattered, broken, forgotten, taken far from their home and their name. Many don't even know who they are anymore. But here's the twist. The Bible also says that one day they would remember. In the middle of struggle, poverty, pain, and captivity, a spark would light up, a voice would rise up, and people who were once called nobodies would stand and say, "We are the children of Israel." Is it possible that the real Jews, the true chosen of God, have been hidden in plain sight all along? In this video, we're going to open the Bible, not traditions, not politics, not what the world says, but what God says. And when we're done, you might never look at history or yourself the same way again. Let's begin. When people hear the phrase God's chosen people, they often think it means God picked one group to be better than everyone else, like a teacher choosing their favorite student. But that's not what it means at all. Being chosen doesn't mean you're better. It means you've been given a job, a mission, a purpose. A long time ago, God made a promise to a man named Abraham. He told him, "I will make your children into a great nation, and through your family, all the nations of the earth will be blessed." That nation became Israel, not just one country, but a people who were meant to carry God's light. Think of it like this. Imagine the world is a dark room, and God gave Israel a lamp. Their job was to walk through the room and help others see. Not to show off the light, but to share it. God gave them His laws, His wisdom, His presence, and He told them, "If you walk with me, the world will see what love looks like, what justice looks like, what holiness really is." But here's the thing. Being chosen came with responsibility. It wasn't about power. It was about service. It was about showing the world who God is, even when it was hard. And sadly, like many people, they didn't always stay faithful. They struggled. They forgot who they were. And sometimes they even tried to blend in with the nations around them. So God warned them, "If you walk away from me, trouble will come." And it did. The people were scattered, captured, forgotten. Their lamp grew dim, but God didn't forget them. He made a promise. One day, He would gather them again. He would reignite the flame, and they would shine once more, not for fame, but for truth. So the question now isn't just who were the chosen back then. It's who are the ones carrying God's light now? Let's keep going. When we talk about being Jewish or being one of God's people, most people think about family trees. Like, if your parents were Jewish, then so are you. That makes sense on the outside. But the Bible goes much deeper than just family blood. In the book of Romans, Paul, who was a Jew himself, says something surprising. He writes, "A person is not a Jew who is only one outwardly. No, a real Jew is one inwardly. And true circumcision is not something done to the body, but something done to the heart." Romans 2:28-29. That's a big deal. It means that being one of God's people isn't just about how you look or where you were born. It's about who you are on the inside. It's about your heart, your faith, and your obedience to God. So let's ask this. If someone is born into a Hebrew family but doesn't believe in God or follow His ways, are they still chosen? And what about someone who wasn't born Jewish but loves God, follows His commands, and lives with faith? Could they be considered one of His? Paul says yes. The Bible teaches that God sees beyond the skin. He sees the spirit. It's not about the outside label. It's about what's inside your soul. This is really important, especially in today's world. People argue over bloodlines and DNA and tradition. But God has always cared more about faith than flesh. Even in the Old Testament, there were people like Ruth, a Moabite woman, who wasn't an Israelite by birth, but chose to follow the God of Israel. And because of her faith, she became part of the family. In fact, she became the great-grandmother of King David. God isn't impressed by names, nations, or appearances. He looks at the heart. He always has. So when we ask, who are the real Jews today? Maybe we need to stop looking at the surface and start looking at the spirit, because sometimes the people closest to God are the ones the world never expected. A long time ago, the nation of Israel wasn't just one big group. It was actually made up of 12 tribes, all descended from the 12 sons of Jacob, who was later renamed Israel by God. But after King Solomon died, the kingdom split in two. The southern kingdom was called Judah, and it included the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. The northern kingdom kept the name Israel, and it had the other 10 tribes. Here's where the mystery begins. The northern kingdom of Israel didn't obey God. They turned to idols and false gods, so God allowed the Assyrians to conquer them. The 10 tribes were taken away, and most of them never came back. They were scattered across nations, lost among foreign lands, their identity slowly erased. These became known as the lost tribes of Israel. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us exactly where they went, but over time, stories and clues began to appear in different parts of the world. There are tribes in Africa, India, Asia, and even the Americas who claim to be descended from these lost Israelites. Some of them kept traditions that sound strangely similar to ancient Hebrew customs. Some kept Sabbath days, some followed cleanliness laws, some even practiced circumcision or had prayers that sounded like Hebrew. But how could they have known these things? Could it be that they are the children of Israel, scattered just like the Bible said? In Deuteronomy 28, God warned that his people would be scattered from one end of the earth to the other. They would be strangers in lands they didn't know. Their names would be taken from them, and they would forget who they were. But the story doesn't end there, because later, God promises that in the last days, he would gather his people again, not just physically, but spiritually. He would wake them up, and they would remember the truth. So maybe the real question isn't just, where did the tribes go? Maybe it's, are they starting to come back? Imagine living your whole life not knowing who you really are. Imagine carrying a name that isn't yours, speaking a language that's not your own, and believing a history that's been rewritten. Now imagine one day, you start to question everything. That's exactly what the Bible says would happen to God's people in the last days. In a book called Baruch, which some early believers read alongside the Bible, there's a powerful prophecy. It says, "They will remember themselves in the land of their captivity." Baruch 2:30. That means even though they were taken far from their home, even though their names were changed, even though they were made to forget who they were, one day something inside them would wake up. They'd start asking, why are we treated this way? Why does the world hate us? Who were our ancestors? Could we be more than what we've been told? And little by little, the truth would start to rise. They'd find clues in old books, in hidden scriptures, in stories passed down by grandmothers, in strange traditions that didn't quite fit their surroundings. They'd see themselves in the pages of the Bible, not as outsiders, but as the main characters. They would remember the name Israel. They would remember the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And they would begin to return, not just to a location, but to a calling. That's happening right now. All over the world, people are waking up. From the islands of the Caribbean to the towns of West Africa, from the streets of America to the hills of India, people are starting to say, I think we are the people the Bible is talking about. They don't want fame, they don't want power, they just want the truth. Because when you remember who you are, you remember who you belong to. And that, right there, is the beginning of the return. If the real children of Israel were scattered, forgotten, and made to forget their identity, Then a question rises quietly but powerfully. Who took their place? The Bible gives us a warning. In the book of Revelation, Jesus speaks to the churches and says something that should make us stop and think. Twice, in Revelation 2:9 and 3:9, he says, "I know the blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan." That's a heavy statement. Jesus isn't just saying some people are confused. He's saying some are lying on purpose, pretending, claiming to be God's chosen when they're not. How could this happen? History tells us that over the centuries, there were groups who converted to Judaism not because of faith, but for power, safety, or politics. Some were royalty, some were merchants, some controlled armies. Over time, they became accepted as Jews, not by God's definition, but by man's. Meanwhile, the true descendants of Israel, the ones who bore the curses of Deuteronomy 28, who were taken in slave ships, who lost their language and names, were called everything except who they truly were. They were called Negro, colored, slave, African, untouchable. They were told they were cursed, backwards, less than human. But what if the people the world looked down on were the ones God was lifting up? Satan has always tried to copy and counterfeit what God does. He raises up fakes to confuse people. He puts crowns on imposters and hides the real royalty in the dirt. But God sees everything, and He keeps perfect records. So while the world may follow tradition and history books may be rewritten, the truth is still alive. And today more and more people are starting to ask, if they're not the real Jews, then who is? The answer isn't about hate, it's about healing. Not about replacing, but restoring. When people talk about God's chosen people, the conversation often turns to things like race, color, heritage, or DNA. But the truth is, God doesn't think the way we think. In 1 Samuel 16:7, God says something to the prophet Samuel that changes everything. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. This one verse breaks every box we try to put people into. We live in a world that's obsessed with labels: black, white, rich, poor, Jew, Gentile. But God is not interested in labels. He's looking for truth, and truth lives inside the Spirit. Even in the days of Jesus, the Pharisees were proud of their heritage. They said, "We are children of Abraham." But Jesus looked at them and said, "If you were truly Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham." John 8:39. In other words, it's not about where you come from. It's about what's coming out of your life. Now that doesn't mean God has forgotten His promises to the physical descendants of Israel. Not at all. The Bible says those promises still stand. But it also shows us that being chosen isn't just about blood. It's about belief. It's about obedience. It's about a heart that's soft toward God. In Romans 9, Paul says something powerful. They are not all Israel who are descended from Israel. That means someone could have the right background, the right name, even the right traditions, and still miss the mark. At the same time, someone the world would never expect, someone from a poor family, a different nation, or a forgotten tribe, could have a heart full of faith, and God calls them His. So what does all this mean? It means we can't judge with human eyes. It means the truth might be deeper and more beautiful than we thought. It means God's family is made up of people from every walk of life, united not by skin, but by spirit. But if God did scatter His true people, if they really are waking up now, then how can we know who they are? The Bible gives us clues.